The hive never sleeps. Its breath is the stench of promethium fires, its heartbeat the endless clang of manufactorum forges, its blood the billions of lives compressed into rusted towers and lightless depths. From the highest spires gilded with the imperial aquila to the abyssal sump where light has never touched, existence is a struggle measured in rations, in toxins inhaled, in the sound of boots echoing down steel corridors. And yet in these impossible vertical worlds, humanity clings on, starving, fighting, praying, because to fall silent would be to abandon the God Emperor himself. To live on a hive world is to be devoured by it, cell by cell, until nothing remains but labor, devotion, or ash. Before we descend fully into the choking air and crowded veins of the hive, I must pause a moment. If you wish to follow this journey into the shadows of humanity's most desperate battlegrounds, into the suffering and endurance that define the Imperium's beating industrial heart, then give this channel your strength. Like, share, and subscribe so that together we can continue illuminating the places where history and nightmare meet. The sky above the hive is a lie. To those who inhabit the spires, those towering crowns of steel and adamantium reaching far above the clouds of ash, the heavens are never seen in their true form. Instead, the sky is filtered through shields of smog, chemrains that streak the windows, and the ceaseless hum of voidcraft descending toward the landing platforms. To live in the upper reaches is to believe, however falsely, that one dwells close to purity. But purity does not exist here. Even the noble-born who sip recycled amasec beneath banners stitched with the imperial aquila breathe air thick with poison, and even they know that one crack in the fortress walls means the swarm of billions below would flood upward like vermin searching for light. Those who serve in the mid-spires, scribes, minor officials, factors who tally shipments of promethium and grain, carry themselves with fragile dignity. They speak as though above the rabble. Yet every morning they walk past the lines of starving petitioners at the gates, their children crying for bread that will never be given. It is a daily theater of cruelty, a reminder that survival here is not earned by virtue or skill, but by placement in the endless lottery of birth. And beneath the polished boots of Arbite's patrols, the great hive groans like an ancient machine held together by devotion and fear. The sound is constant. It seeps into every thought. The thrum of generators, the screech of lift chains dragging rusted cages of workers from one manufactorum level to the next, the murmur of prayers whispered into cracked vox grills. The hive is alive, but its life is not benevolent. It is an old, hungry titan, and it cares nothing for the individual so long as its billions continue to churn. Yet even here, at the edge of supposed privilege, hunger gnaws. Rations are stretched thin. A family of 6 may live for weeks on what a spire official discards in a single meal. Water comes through the pipes with a taste of metal, sometimes flecked with black residue that stains the lips. The desperate steal what they can. Children slip into drainage tunnels in search of forgotten caches, only to vanish beneath the endless maze of conduits. Their names are murmured in the quiet of Hablock shrines, their faces remembered only until the next famine takes another. Violence, too, is never far. Though Arbite squads move in disciplined columns, their shotguns heavy across armored chests, the law cannot silence every blade. Gangs sprout even in these levels, their symbols carved into the walls, their oaths sworn in blood. They are less organized than the vast underhive clans, but their presence is a reminder that no tier of the hive is free of the constant contest for survival. Some serve noble houses, unofficially sanctioned thugs who ensure rival merchants never prosper too long. Others form around faith, ragged youths who claim to see visions of the Emperor's light burning through the smog. Whether prophet or killer, each carries the same desperate look. The eyes of one who knows the hive will never stop pressing inward. The spire windows face outward, yet even there the view offers no comfort. Below lies an ocean of smoke, the endless churning storm that hides the world beneath. No one who gazes downward can truly measure its depth. They can only sense it,
the weight of countless lives stacked tier upon tier, each praying, working, dying in their turn. And beyond that ocean, when the clouds part for an instant, the ruined horizon can be glimpsed. Wastelands, stripped by millennia of industry, where only the husks of war machines and half-buried bones remain. The Hive is both cradle and coffin, and those in the spires know it. Still, there are moments of beauty. Lumen globes flicker golden against cathedral arches. Choirs of children sing hymns in cracked voices, their words echoing through chambers that seem endless. Pilgrims light candles at the feet of statues, wax dripping like tears down stone faces scarred by centuries of devotion. These are the fragments that hold citizens together, the fragile illusions of grace. Yet even here, in halls where incense curls through the air and the God Emperor's visage is carved into every arch, whispers move in secret. Whispers of shortages, whispers of uprisings below, whispers that the Hive itself is failing, that its foundations sink deeper every year into decay. The spires promise security, but the Hive gives no such gift. It only delays the inevitable descent. For the Hive always draws one downward, toward the endless machinery, toward the places where survival is no longer dressed in illusions of dignity. And every spire-born citizen knows, though they may never speak it, that to fall from these heights is to vanish into a world where even names are stripped away and the Hive remembers nothing but labor. To be born in the spire is not to be free of fear, but merely to be granted more elaborate cages. The noble houses drape their walls with silks and gold thread, but behind the hangings are the same creaking pipes that rattle through every level of the Hive, the same recycled air, the same faint vibration of machinery that never ceases. Even the most exalted banquet hall is built upon layers of rust, and the servants who carry platters of vat-grown meat know that if they falter, they are discarded with no more thought than a broken tool. To dine by lumen chandeliers is to eat while listening to the slow, muffled scream of billions grinding their lives away below. The Arbites guard the noble courts with polished carapace armor, their visors reflecting the torchlight of sacred braziers, yet even they cannot keep out the echoes of desperation. Petitioners climb the great stairways that coil upward into the noble districts, their knees raw and bleeding as they beg for favors that will never be granted. Most are turned away with shock mauls, some disappear into dungeons whose doors are never spoken of, and a rare few are chosen as curiosities, freaks plucked from the depths to serve as reminders of the Emperor's infinite mercy. Those who remain in the courts tell themselves they are chosen, that the God Emperor has placed them here to rule, but when their windows rattle with distant gunfire from riots below, their prayers grow longer and their eyes betray a dread they dare not admit. Every Hive spire holds cathedrals, vast, echoing structures where choirs lift their voices into vaults blackened by incense and smoke. It is said the hymns reach the ears of Terra itself, though many suspect the sound never rises beyond the choking air of the Hive roof. Still, the faithful gather, and their voices merge into a thunder that shakes the stained glass with its fervor. In these moments, the illusion of unity is powerful. The poorest servant and the highest noble may stand side by side, heads bowed in reverence. Yet when the service ends, they return to their separate worlds, and the gulf yawns wider than before. There are rumors whispered in these sacred halls, rumors that the relics displayed upon the altars are no more genuine than the titles of nobility themselves. A bone said to be from a saint might be nothing but a shard of forgotten servitor, polished and blessed until memory itself bends to the story. The priests do not deny it, for faith is not built on truth alone. Faith is survival. To question is heresy, and heresy is death. So the people pray, not because they believe every word, but because prayer is the only language the Hive understands.
Outside, the air thickens with chemfog. The higher one climbs, the thinner the illusion becomes.
Servitors shuffle along the walkways, their flesh half swallowed by augmetics, their empty eyes fixed forward as they polish the rails and clear the drains. They remind every passerby that life here is one step away from mechanized servitude, that even the privileged are bound by the same fate if they displease the wrong patron or fail to meet a tithe. The Hive has no mercy. It has only functions, and every citizen, no matter how high or low, exists to serve them. Children of the Spire grow up with stories of the Underhive told as warnings. They are taught that to fall downward is to cease to exist, that the depths are inhabited by mutants and faithless heretics who feed on the flesh of the unwary. Yet curiosity festers in some hearts. Youths sometimes dare each other to descend into the lower levels, slipping past guard posts, following the echo of gang laughter down stairwells that spiral endlessly. Most return pale, silent, unwilling to speak of what they saw. Some never return at all. Their names are quickly erased from family records, their portraits turned to face the wall. And so, the Spires live in constant tension, the lure of height, the dread of the fall. The nobles cling to their thrones as if their weight alone will keep them safe, while the workers and scribes beneath them dream of rising higher, even as they know the path upward is barred by walls of steel and faith. The Hive is a paradox, promising elevation while always dragging its children downward. To dwell beneath the spires is to feel that gravity every day, a pull stronger than any planetary core, a reminder that no one truly escapes. For in the Hive, the descent is inevitable. And when it comes, it begins with whispers, with shortages, with riots muffled by distance. The air grows heavier. The voices of the faithful rise in desperation, and the sound of industry drowns all else. Soon, the machinery of survival itself will consume those who thought themselves above it. The first true warning is always the sound, not the constant groan that runs through every beam and buttress, but a new vibration, a discordant shiver that unsettles crockery in the noble dining halls and rattles the devotional candles in the lesser chapels. It comes like a cough through an old throat, a tremor that crawls along the lattice of the Hive and makes even the most pious glance at the nearest shrine. Tech adepts pause mid-litany and run auspex wands along the bulkheads, their mechadendrites twitching as they translate the Hive's complaint into lines of Binharic that no common citizen will ever read. The verdict, whispered through a dozen vox grills, is always the same. Stresses are within acceptable variance. The statement is repeated until it sounds like truth, but everyone feels the hair rise along their arms when the floor plates tick and settle, and somewhere far below a lift chain screams as if flayed. Shortages arrive with the tremors, or perhaps the tremors are only noticed when shortages do. Ration queues lengthen until they spiral through entire hab blocks, loops of humanity waiting beneath weeping pipes. The water stills in the cisterns and gathers a thin skin of metallic taste, and even those with stamped tokens find themselves turned away by servitors reciting the same phrase in voice boxes that never tire. The arbitites stand in their measured ranks and count the hearts that beat in anger, their visors blank to the pleading. A rumor slips through the line like a razor. A grain ship missed its window, a manufactorum caught fire, a noble house diverted a shipment to pay a debt owed off-world. Everyone repeats a different version of the story because the truth matters less than the feeling that the Hive is tightening its grip. The manufactoria answer with longer shifts. Klaxons burn the ears at hours that no longer have names. Workers who once climbed the lift cages twice a day now ride them 4 and 5 times until their knees lock and their mouths fill with the taste of hot iron. The mid-spire scribes scratch new tithe tallies on data slates with trembling styluses, and the factors who wear rings marked with house seals pretend not to notice how their clerks' teeth chatter. On the walkways outside, Skitari march through the chemfog in impeccable files, their augmetic eyes bright as lumen beads, the soft click of their footfalls echoing with machine regularity. They do not look left or right. They are the Mechanicus made flesh and metal, and their presence is a reminder that the hive belongs to function before it belongs to people.
In the chapels, the ecclesiarchy redoubles its hymns. Priests paint the sign of the imperial aquila across foreheads slick with sweat and promise endurance to those who remain obedient. A reliquary is brought forth, cloth-wrapped, rung with bells, and the faithful press forward to kiss it, to weep upon it, to surrender their last coin for the privilege. Some claim the reliquary warms in their hands, a sign that the God-Emperor watches. Others murmur that the warmth is only the press of too many bodies in too little space. The priests smile the same way either way, and lead another prayer to drown the argument. If the hive is a furnace, the chapels are the vents through which pressure bleeds in incense and song. Night, when it comes at all, is a trick of dimmed lumen strips rather than darkness. That is when the gangs test their blades along the handrails and mark new sigils in the soot. They move with the confidence of those who have learned to navigate the hive's arteries in 3 dimensions, who can read a maintenance shaft by scent alone. They are still smaller in the spire shadow than the leviathans below, but their hunger is the same. A merchant's son vanishes on his way home from a late account audit, and for a week the noble courts throb with sudden philanthropy as house agents hunt for a culprit to purchase absolution from. But the boy's name fades when the next shipment misses its mark and the lifts stall again. Astra Militarum troop transports thunder across the upper docking rings once, twice, and then vanish beyond the cloud deck with their cargoes of grit-jawed conscripts. The citizens stop and watch, faces tilted to the roar. For a breath there is pride, or the shadow of it, because those who leave carry the hive's name stamped into their tags. But when the echoes die, the silence that follows feels wider, as if a piece of the city's strength has been lifted away. Someone whispers that war on the frontier has grown worse, that tithe demands will rise. Another swears the ships left half empty because the underhive riots choked the routes to the mustering yards. Neither claim can be proved by anyone who matters. Both are believed by everyone who does not. The tremors return, closer now, with a new voice in the metal, a dull, wet percussion like fists beating from inside a sealed drum. Hab doors stick in their frames, and the glow from the lumen strip stitches in uneven lines along corridor ceilings. In a noble's banquet hall, a hairline crack divides a fresco of the emperor triumphant, and the room goes colder, as if a vent has opened on the void. Tech adepts lay their palms to the walls and whisper the rite of soothing bearings. Arbites increase patrol spacing by half a corridor, then by another. The scribes sign off on the paperwork and tuck it beneath other sheets, as if a change in ink could alter reality. Every adjustment is small enough to deny panic, each denial piled on the last until the heap becomes a scaffold. It is at such times that the hive teaches its most honest lesson. Height is a temporary condition, not a salvation. A single lifter seizure, a single ration riot that surges past the measured lines of batons and shields, a single manufactorum outage that leaves a noble house without heat or lumen for a night, and the distance between spire and sump narrows to the width of a breath. The descent does not always announce itself with a fall. Sometimes it opens like a door, and the city invites you to step through. When that door opens, it is already too late to bargain with the mechanism that swung it. Tomorrow, the lifts to the mid-level manufactoria will clatter earlier than they have in years. A notice will arrive carried by a servitor with a paper tongue, stamped with cog and skull, instructing every able body to present for recalibration of schedules. The chemrain will thicken until it patters like ash on the promenade, and in the chapels the candles will burn faster as if the air itself devours them. Some will tighten their belts and bow their heads. Others will look down through the spire windows toward the ocean of smoke and think for the first time of what waits beneath it. And the hive, as patient as geology, will draw its breath to swallow. There are moments when the spires appear eternal, when their Gothic arches glow with lumen fire and their stained glass flickers like 1,000 tiny suns. Processions march through their boulevards, incense clouds drifting like holy fog, and banners snapping in the stale air as if heralding triumph. From balconies high above, nobles in robes of crimson and sable watch these spectacles with expressions carefully schooled into serenity. They know such displays exist not to honor them, but to remind them of the emperor's gaze, a gaze that pierces through smog and silence alike. Yet beneath the solemn chants, beneath the orchestrated hymns, the foundations of their world groan.
For the hive never forgets. Every step a noble takes echoes down into levels where no light shines, where those forgotten centuries ago still claw at life. To walk the promenades of the spires is to tread upon graves built higher than mountains. The citizens who serve here, scribes with their eyes ruined by data slate glow, heralds coughing blood into perfumed sleeves, guardsmen whose boots crunch ash ground fine as flour, know that they are living above a wound that never closes. They smile when spoken to, bow when commanded, and whisper prayers when the Arbites pass. But inside, they know the truth. The hive will one day swallow even the brightest tower, and no one will remember their names. Some nights, the noble balconies grow restless. A scream echoes upward from some forgotten shaft, or a firelight flickers far below, too distant to identify, but too vivid to ignore. These moments linger like smoke in the lungs. A noblewoman may pause mid-sentence at her banquet, the silver fork trembling in her hand as the muffled crack of gunfire reverberates through the walls. The guests will laugh it away, speaking of distant hunting parties or training drills, but the laughter comes too sharp, too quick, like glass breaking beneath a boot. They all know better. The hive is shifting. Its hunger sharpens. And the higher one stands, the more precarious the ground beneath becomes. Faith becomes the balm for this unspoken fear. Chapels overflow with nobles and servants alike, all kneeling shoulder to shoulder, murmuring the same desperate psalms. Priests thunder of the god emperor's eternal vigilance, their voices cracking as they strike censers against the altar steps. The scent of incense mingles with the copper tang of blood, for many come bearing wounds of flagellation, their backs raw beneath embroidered robes. To bleed is to offer, to suffer is to prove loyalty. In these rituals, unity is forged, even if only for a moment. But when the doors close and the faithful spill back into corridors of steel and stone, the divisions return, sharper than before. There are those who see opportunity in the tremors. Gang leaders from the mid-spires descend in secret, offering their knives to noble patrons, eager to weaken rivals. Manufactorum foremen whisper of strikes, of slowing the machines until concessions are made. Even scribes, the meekest of all, learn to falsify tallies in the hope of carving a fraction of safety for their families. The Arbites know these truths, but they cannot arrest an entire hive. So they patrol, they punish, and they vanish names from the records, hoping the fear of disappearance will keep the illusion of order intact. Yet every erasure leaves behind a silence, and silence is more dangerous than noise.
The illusion of height endures only as long as the people believe it separates them from the depths. But all know, in secret, that the hive is one body. Every spire, every sump, every manufactorum and shrine is a bone in its skeleton, a vein in its flesh. When the hive shudders, all feel it, from the noble courts to the underhive wastes. And so the spires are not a sanctuary, but a waiting room, a place where one listens for the next vibration, the next shortage, the next shift that pulls the ground away. As the camrains fall harder, streaking the stained glass with gray rivulets, a child in the noble courts leans too far over a balcony rail and peers into the storm. He does not see stars. He does not see light. He sees only the endless churn of smoke, the half-formed shapes of towers below, and a flicker of fire that vanishes as soon as he notices it. His nurse drags him back, scolding, but the image has already burned into him. He has glimpsed the truth that the nobles spend their lives pretending does not exist. The descent has already begun, and no spire stands forever. The hive waits, as it always does, and when it calls, the journey downward begins not with a fall, but with a step. The day begins before the lumen strips pretend to be dawn. A klaxon bleeds through the habstacks, a two-note wail that wakes even those who learn to sleep through war. Doors sigh open along the galleries, and bodies pour out, bundled in threadbare work cloaks, faces gray with the dust that never washes clean. The lift cages arrive coughing sparks, their mesh doors buckling inward with the weight of too many hands. Children cling to their parents' belts until a servo skull descends, Vox grill rasping quota recitations, and the crowd recoils just enough for the cage to close. Then the world drops, and the descent to the manufactoria begins like a prayer with no amen.
The heat hits first. It comes up the throat and settles behind the eyes, a pressure that bends the spine before a shift has even started. The forges wake in stages, lines of red mouths yawning wide as tech adepts anoint their housings with sacred oils, cogtooth sensors ticking as they swing. Binaric blisters across the air like hail. A Scutarius sergeant watches from a gantry, augmetic gaze indifferent, while servitors shuffle to their stations with cables trailing like veins torn loose. No one speaks above the drumming of stamp presses. Words are a luxury wasted where steel must sing. There is rhythm to survival here, a pattern learned the way one learns to breathe in poison. The line operator lays the feeder plate, the next clamps, the next seals, counts, stamps, releases. On another deck entirely, riveters drive tungsten teeth into armored housings meant for machines that will never be seen by anyone on this level. Above, a forest of chains carries half-built assemblies from line to line, sweating rust onto the world below. When something misaligns, everyone feels the lurch in their bones. When something breaks, the prayer changes cadence and adds the names of the dead without ceremony. The line must move. It always moves. A woman with scarred palms and a data slate strapped to her forearm stalks the catwalk like a captain on a listing ship. She is a forewoman because she remembers every tally without looking, and because she has learned to shout in a way the machines respect. Her voice carries through the smoke, cutting cleanly between press cycles. She knows each operator by the pattern of their cough, each servo by the timbre of its hymn motor. When a boy stumbles and catches his sleeve on a feeding lip, she turns before the scream begins and slams the kill rune with her fist, then wraps the bleeding arm with cloth dipped in coolant. The Scutarius does not look down. The tech adept does not deviate from the rite of restart. The line shudders, pauses, resumes. The boy grits his teeth and stays. Rations are earned in units stamped, not in prayers offered. A tally board flickers above the line, lumen digits crawling upward with a merciless logic that bleeds hope from the lungs. When the number lags behind the tithe demand, a servo skull hovers low, its parchment tongue unfurling to announce corrective extension in a voice too calm for the word. No one argues. An arbites pair appears at the far door, as if conjured by the decree, shotguns held at the angle that suggests wisdom. A rumor moves along the assembly. A nearby manufactorum ross to shift to a coolant breach, so their deficit bleeds into this one. A macroclade of Forge World inspectors is expected, and numbers must gleam. The details change, the weight does not. Breaks are a fiction maintained to measure obedience. A siren croaks, the lines break, and bodies slide to the floor or curl beside warm housings to steal heat that isn't theirs. Water from a wall spigot tastes of iron and old algae, but it is wet, and so it is precious. A catechist in blistered robes pushes through with a bundle of parchment saints and rivet-sized icons stamped with the imperial aquila. He speaks of fortitude, of the sacred dignity of labor, of the emperor's hand steady upon every lever. Some press coin into his palm because a coin makes a sound that convinces the skull hovering overhead they are devout. Others kiss the icon because they need to feel any metal that is not part of a machine. When work resumes, vision narrows to the edge of a plate and the line between the last safe movement and the first fatal one. The manufactorum floor glitters with filings that lodge beneath the nails and work their way inward until knuckles swell and split. Masks clog, filters fail, the lungs adapt by forgetting how to be clean. In the rafters, maintenance servitors crawl like pale beetles, scraping soot into sacks that will be dumped into ducts that empty into pits someone else will sort. Everything is used twice, then used again. Sometimes, a red-robed tech priest halts the world with a raised, augmetic hand. Silence ripples outward from the gesture, a miracle in a place that has forgotten what quiet is. He swivels a lens, consults a hanging string of purity seals affixed to a cogitator rack, and declares a deviation in the press tempo. He intones the litany of calibration. The Scutari sergeant relays the command without turning his head. The adjustment is so slight no one feels it, but the priest does, and his relief is a benediction that smells of hot oil and faith. Work resumes. No one remarks that 3 bodies were carried away during the pause.
At shift change, which is to say when the numbers find the day's shape and the overseers decide enough, the lift cages wheeze open and disgorge a fresh flood of faces as spent as those they replace. The trades of exhaustion pass in a glance. You take my station, I take your breath. Somewhere near the north bulkhead, a fight starts over missing ration shit and ends when an arbitus baton puts bone to sleep. There are no names exchanged, only the shallow certainty that tomorrow the baton's path will find a different skull. Above all this, on a bridge of grating that hums with the breath of turbines, a window looks down on the line. It does not belong here. Its glass is clear and thick, its frame edged with gold leaf that has not entirely peeled. Behind it, a factor in a lacquered coat watches the digits climb. He drinks amasec that tastes of metal and victory, and tells himself that numbers are lives arranged into meaning. The forewoman glances up once, not in appeal, not in hatred, only to remind herself a human face is attached to the quotas that carve her people into hours. Then she looks back to the press. The press is honest. It opens. It closes. It demands. When the siren finally calls the end, there is no cheer, only a sag that moves through the deck like a tide. Tools are set aside with the tenderness one might give a sleeping child, because to drop them risks waking something cruel. The lift cages fill, the doors bow inward, and as the floor begins to rise, the workers look at their hands, as if surprised to find them still attached. The ascent is slower, heavier, as if the hive itself resents the loss of even this small portion of labor. At the hab level, doors open to corridors that sweat and pipes that whisper. The day has been given to the machine, and what remains must be traded for sleep. No one believes they will be permitted all of it. A tremor walks the wall as the last bodies spill out, a subtle shift with a deeper note threaded through, as if something vast turned in its sleep. In a chapel, wedged between heat exchangers, candles gutter sideways, and a statue of the god emperor seems to tilt half a breath toward the floor. The catechist steadies it with both hands and smiles as if nothing moved at all. In the far distance, there is the faintest echo of a riot, or a celebration, or an accident no one will claim. The Hive will decide the name by morning. And morning always comes too early here. The ascent after a shift never feels like deliverance. The lift cages climb with a moan, chains rattling in their housings, sparks raining from contacts left uncleaned for centuries. Workers leaning to one another, shoulders pressed, too tired to care about sweat or blood. The smell is everywhere, metallic, oily, alive in the lungs. When the cage jolts, the bodies sway together like wheat bent by a cruel wind. Someone coughs and cannot stop, the hacking swallowed by the sound of gears, the body hunched over and shivering as if trying to tear itself free of the Hive's grip. No one intervenes. To touch is to claim, and to claim is to inherit weakness. At the hab level, the crowd disperses into warrens where ceilings sag with condensation. The alleys here are barely corridors, lit with lumen strips that gutter when the pressure drops. Vents whisper, carrying voices from manufactoria still roaring 2 decks below. Whole families curl on bunks welded from scrap, sharing warmth because heat is rationed traitor than food. A man drags himself inside, fingers still raw from a machine belt that caught and tore them. His wife does not ask what happened. She only binds his hands with the same cloth she uses to swaddle their infant. The cloth darkens, and she sets her lips to prayer without looking at him. Both know that if infection blooms, the medici will not waste supplies. A servitor will replace his hands, or he will vanish. Markets bloom in shadow. Not sanctioned, but tolerated. A narrow square beneath a broken vent hosts a dozen stalls lit with scavenged glow rods. Workers trade ration slips for slivers of meat of uncertain origin, for water flasks that might have seen 3 refills already, for fungal bread grown in sump pools and smoked until the smell of rot hides beneath a bitter crust. Children slip through the crowd with quick fingers, cutting chip purses loose, vanishing into pipes with their prize. Everyone knows. Everyone pretends not to see. To name the theft would be to admit hunger, and hunger is weakness too visible to survive long.
The Arbites patrols move through the markets like shadows given armor. They do not shout, do not argue. They step where they will, and the crowd parts as if the floor opened beneath. Their shotguns gleam even in the sickly light, their black carapace armor scarred by 1,000 shifts of policing desperation. When they find contraband, unregistered ammo slugs, a vial of stim injector, a last pack cracked open for its charge, they take it without a word. Sometimes they take the vendor, too. The cages swallow such people, and the Hive never speaks their names again. Yet the markets always reopen. The Hive feeds itself in ways the tithe tallies will never acknowledge. The catechists follow close behind, their robes patched with grease and ash, their censers burning incense too weak to cover the stink of human press. They hold aloft tattered icons and shout hymns to drown out the mutters of the crowd. For some, their presence is a comfort. For others, a weight. One worker mutters that the emperor does not walk these corridors, that no god would permit lungs to blacken before the age of 30. His companion silences him with a backhand so swift it is almost mercy. Heresy can be overheard by anyone, and the Arbites have sharp ears. Better a bruise than a disappearance. Children play even here, though their games are strange parodies of survival. They race broken servo limbs down gutter channels, betting ration crumbs on whose relic will carry furthest. They mimic Arbites with sticks for shotguns, shouting commands they have heard shouted at their parents. Their laughter is thin but real, cutting across the hum of ducks like something forbidden. Some adults smile despite themselves. Others look away, the sound too painful, too full of what will one day be lost. Childhood here is only an interlude before the manufactorum claims them. In one corner of the market, a storyteller sits cross-legged, voice gravel from fumes, spinning tales of Terra and of the emperor's palace whose towers pierce the heavens. Few believe him, fewer care. Yet his words gather listeners, if only because they give shape to hope. He tells of light unfiltered by smog, of oceans wider than hives, of air that smells of nothing at all. His listeners close their eyes and imagine it, if only for the time it takes to draw a poisoned breath. When the Arbites pass again, he lowers his voice to a hum. When they vanish, he resumes. No law can stop stories. And above all this, the machinery does not rest. Through the night, the manufactoria beat their rhythm, a pulse that trembles the hob walls and rocks the market stalls. It is a reminder that every second belongs to the hive. Even when the shift is over, even when one pretends to eat, to pray, to sleep, the machine demands. Its song never ceases. Its appetite never tires. And those who live in its shadow know the truth. Survival is not measured in days, but in the number of times one can wake and answer the klaxon again. The klaxon's cry is the same every day, but the body never grows accustomed to it. It is a sound without mercy, sharp as a blade and unrelenting as winter. Men and women rise from bunks, still damp with sweat, their limbs trembling from labor not yet forgotten. The hob corridors fill with the shuffle of boots, the hiss of breath drawn too shallow, the soft moans of children stirred too soon. There is no time to pause, no time to wait for strength to return. The lift cages will not wait. The manufactorum does not forgive lateness. Descending again is like entering the throat of a beast. The air grows hotter, heavier, the walls close in, rivets sweating moisture that runs like veins. As the cages shudder downward, some close their eyes and mouth prayers, while others stare blankly ahead, their faces carved by exhaustion into masks more servitor than human. And still the descent continues, until the roar of the forges fills every thought, until the hum of machinery seeps into the marrow. When the doors rattle open, the world is already burning. Work begins before thought. The body remembers movements the mind can no longer name. Hands grip plates, shift them, slam them into place. Sparks leap across faces without reaction, leaving black freckles that never fade. Above, chains grind with their loads, dripping red-brown rust onto the shoulders below. A boy coughs blood into his sleeve but keeps moving. If he falls, the line will not stop again. If he falters, his absence will be noted, not his suffering. To live here is to learn that the machine has no memory of kindness.
The overseers pace the catwalks, silhouettes cut against the glare. Their voices are stripped of inflection, reduced to single syllables barked like gunshots. Sometimes a hand lashes out, striking a worker back into rhythm. Sometimes it is only a glare, but the glare alone carries enough weight to steady trembling hands. Beneath them, the catechists pace as well, swinging censers of cheap incense that cannot mask the stink of sweat and burnt flesh. Their litanies are shouted until their voices break, commanding endurance in the emperor's name. No one dares question whether the emperor listens. In the manufactoria, only obedience is heard. Breaks are worse than labor. To stop moving is to feel the ache settle into the bones, to feel the lungs clawing at air thick with ash. Workers slump against the walls, lips split from dehydration, hands blistered raw. The water spigots release only enough to wet the tongue, never enough to quench. Food is rationed in cakes so dense they crack teeth. Yet when the siren bleats, bodies rise again, because to remain still is to invite the baton, or worse, the Arbitite's shotguns. No one asks for mercy. The hive has no word for it. There are stories whispered along the lines, carried in fragments from one exhausted throat to another. of Manufactoria where coolant leaks turned entire shifts into statues of ice frozen mid-labor until the bodies shattered like glass, of workers who slipped into the great presses and whose remains were never recovered, their identities erased by a number recalibrated upward, of foremen who siphoned rations to sell in the sump markets until their skulls were found nailed to the cages as warnings. The stories grow in the telling, shifting with each retelling, but the lesson is always the same. The machine does not love you. And yet, amid the clamor, there are moments that resist despair. A woman hums an old tune as she welds, her voice rising just enough to reach those beside her. The notes weave through the clangor, and for an instant the machine feels less complete, less invincible. A man scrawls a crude imperial aquila into the soot of a bulkhead, and others add their marks until the wall blooms with wings of ash. A child of the shift, too small to be anything but a runner, darts between lines carrying messages, and his laughter rises above the presses like something almost holy. Such moments are fragile, snuffed in an instant, but they remind the workers they are still alive. The end of shift comes late. It always does. The digits on the tally board climb, stall, then leap as if mocking those who gave themselves to its count. When the signal blares, some collapse where they stand, needing to be dragged to the lifts. Others stumble forward blindly, their hands finding rails by memory. The cages swallow them, the doors slam shut, and the ascent begins once more. The Manufactoria dim, but their heartbeat never ceases. Somewhere, another line has just begun. Somewhere, another cage is descending. And in the silence that follows, broken only by the hiss of coolant and the chant of a lone priest, the hive exhales smoke into the sky. The breath of survival, the breath of despair. Sometimes the machine breaks, and when it does, the hive reveals its true hunger. A shriek tears through the Manufactorum, sharper than steel, louder than prayer. A conveyor buckles, spilling half-built assemblies across the floor. Sparks leap into the rafters and ignite dust that should never have existed. For a moment the world is fire and chaos. Workers scatter, trampling one another in panic, while servitors march blindly on, their flesh masks unflinching, even as their limbs sear. The overseers shout, voices drowned by the roar. Arbitites arrive within heartbeats, their shotguns booming not at the flames, but at the crowd, cutting down those who tried to flee before the emergency protocols can be spoken. Order is restored, not by salvation, but by sacrifice. When the smoke clears, the survivors are herded back into place. The ashes are swept aside, though some glisten with teeth and bone. The catechists declare it a holy reminder that labor is not only duty, but offering. The emperor receives every lost life as proof of devotion. Few dare argue, though some cross themselves with trembling fingers, as if begging forgiveness for their doubt. Work resumes, the line shuddering forward, and within hours, the fire is nothing but memory. The machine has no time for mourning.
In the habs that night, the survivors sit in silence. The glow of lumen strips reflected in eyes too wide, too unblinking. A boy stares at his palms, as if surprised to find them still whole. A mother ties her daughter's hair with a strip torn from her husband's burned tunic, saying nothing. The storytellers do not speak that evening, and the children do not play. Only the hum of pipes fills the silence, a reminder that the hive never rests, not even for grief. There is another kind of breakage, quieter, but no less consuming. When quotas fall too low, when accidents carve too deep a wound in the tally, the Scutari arrive. They march in formation, eyes glowing, weapons held with the calm of inevitability. The workers are lined up against the walls, their names taken, their hands inspected for callus and strength. Then a fraction is chosen, seemingly at random. They are marched away,
their protests swallowed by hymns blasted from vox speakers. Rumor says they're fed into reclamation pits, their flesh converted into nutrient slurries for the sump, their bones ground into reinforcement aggregate. Others insist they are offered as sacrifices to appease the machine spirits, their blood spilled across cogitator altars. No one knows for certain. But the next day, the quotas rise, as if fear itself is fuel. Even the factors are not immune. Sometimes a noble coat vanishes from its gilded balcony, and the next shift begins with a different face behind the glass. Whispers swirl of debt unpaid, of tithes falsified, of rival houses tightening their noose. The workers do not speak of it aloud, but they notice. The machine consumes upward as well as down. Only the God Emperor is said to stand above it. All else is grist for the endless churn. Yet there are nights when the manufactoria seem almost still, when the tremors soften and the klaxons sleep. In those rare hours, the habs become more than cages. Families gather around glow sticks scavenged from failed servitors. Old women murmur songs remembered from ancestors who saw rivers not made of ash. Men carve trinkets from scrap, shaping aquilas or crude saints to hang above bunks. Children chase each other through the dripping corridors, their laughter thin but real. For those hours, the hive is something less than devourer, something almost human. Then the klaxon wakes again, and the moment is lost. The hive teaches one truth in these cycles. Survival is never free. Every breath is purchased with sweat, every shift with blood. The machinery does not care for dreams, for hope, for the names of the dead. It demands only function. And yet within its shadow, humanity persists. The workers endure, not because they believe the machine will spare them, but because they know it will not. To endure is defiance. To endure is worship. As the lifts rise at the end of another shift, faces pale and hollow, eyes searching for light that does not exist, the hive exhales again. The smoke drifts upward, staining even the spires above. Those who breathe it taste the truth that the machinery is survival, and survival is slavery. Tomorrow the cycle will repeat, until one day it does not. And beyond the manufactoria, deeper still, waits the underhive, where the machinery's song fades and something worse takes its place. The descent into the underhive is not marked by gates or banners. It is marked by the slow extinguishing of light. The lumen strips stretch thinner along the corridors until they sputter, leaving long black scars where no glow touches. Pipes leak without repair, spilling rivulets of foul water that turn walkways slick and breed molds the color of rot. The air grows heavier, tasting of ash and rust, and the sound of the manufactoria above is reduced to a distant heartbeat, faint as though the hive itself has chosen to forget this place.
Here the architecture unravels. Hab blocks slump sideways where supports failed decades ago, their floors canted so steeply that furniture becomes rubble piled in corners. Old transit lines vanish into cave-ins of ferrocrete, their carriages rusting coffins packed with skeletal remains. Some corridors lead nowhere, collapsing into rubble or swallowed by water blacker than void. Others open onto caverns so vast that even the hive dwellers, used to immensity, feel a shiver of awe. In these spaces, echoes never return, and the dark feels alive. The people who remain here are not counted, not named, not tithed. They exist outside the hive's numbers, shadows feeding on shadows. Hunger has carved them into shapes almost inhuman, hollow-cheeked, eyes too large for their faces, skin drawn taut by malnutrition until every rib is visible. Many wear patchwork garments, stitched from banners stolen from above, their threads stiff with grime. Children prowl in packs, too young for speech, too cunning for innocence, slipping through ducts with blades of scrap metal and teeth sharp from chewing bones.
They have no families, only temporary clans that dissolve when food runs dry. Water is drawn from cisterns, choked with fungus, filtered through rags, then boiled until the taste of iron overwhelms the mold. The desperate drink it unboiled, gambling that illness will be slower than thirst. Meals are scavenged from sump farms, where pale mushrooms grow fat on human waste, or from the flesh of vermin swollen on toxic runoff. Rats here are not small. Some grow to the size of dogs, their eyes milky, their flesh seething with disease. Killing one is both triumph and terror, for the meat may save a family or doom them all. And yet amid this, there are markets. Crude stalls hammered from wreckage cluster beneath broken vaults, lit by braziers fed with whatever burns, fungus, refuse, even corpses when famine grows cruel. Traders hawk rusted weapons, cracked laspacks, scavenged data slates, whose screens flicker with fragments of forgotten wars. The most precious goods are relics scavenged from collapsed levels, a working filter mask, a half-full water canister, a stub revolver with 2 rounds. Transactions are made in food, in favors, in lives. Trust is a currency too rare to last. The gangs rule here, with symbols carved into walls and blood smeared across doors. They are not organized like the noble-sponsored thugs above. They are tribes, armies born of hunger, bound by oaths written in scars. Some wear bones threaded into necklaces, others paint their faces with sump ash, still others carve the imperial iguala into their flesh as a declaration of faith twisted by desperation. They fight endlessly, for food, for weapons, for the sheer refusal to surrender. A gang war can consume entire districts, reducing hundreds to ash within days, their bones swept into pits that breed plague. Yet when one gang rises above the others gather against it, for balance is the only law the Underhive knows. Faith flickers here too, but it is changed. Chapels collapse and become lairs. Priests descend with icons, and sometimes they are followed, sometimes they are torn apart, their relics scattered as trinkets. Some Underhivers cling to the god Emperor more fiercely than those above, seeing in his golden visage a light burning even in their darkness. Others mock his name, declaring that the Hive itself is their god, a devourer more present than any throne upon Terra. Shrines of rust and bone sprout in corners, offerings of blood and fungus left for spirits no litany names. And always, rumors grow like mold. Rumors of hidden stairwells leading to catacombs untouched for centuries, where food and water lie in sealed vaults. Rumors of ancient machines, dormant, waiting to be awakened. Rumors of something worse than hunger, moving in the black. The Hive breathes differently. It is not the disciplined rhythm of manufacturia, nor the shallow gasps of the spireborn. It is a ragged, uneven breath, as if the Hive itself is suffocating and dragging its people with it. Here, survival is not just labor, it is war, unending and without mercy. And in the silence between screams, when even the rats grow still, the citizens of the depths learn the truth that those above never face. The Hive does not simply consume, it forgets.
And still, some go searching. Hunger drives them downward, into stairwells that twist and crack, into tunnels where no echo returns. Few are seen again. Those who return speak with voices hollow as graves, swearing they heard laughter in the dark, swearing they felt the Hive itself turn to watch them. They tell their stories in markets until the words choke them, and then they vanish too. The Underhive remembers them for a moment, then forgets. The Hive always forgets. The deeper one descends, the more the Hive forgets what it means to be human. Light ceases to serve any purpose. Corridors twist into caverns where the ceiling is lost to shadow, and the floor crunches with debris layered across centuries. Sometimes it is stone and rust, sometimes it is bone. The smell never leaves, the sour tang of rot, the metallic sting of dried blood, the damp musk of water that has been still too long. To live here is to breathe decay, to eat it, to wear it in the folds of rags until even the skin tastes of it. Whole settlements cling to these ruins like barnacles. They huddle around sump lakes that glow faintly from the chemicals leaching upward through broken pipes. Shacks built of scavenged plasteel and fractured masonry rise like diseased teeth, stacked atop one another until they collapse under their own weight. The people inside scurry like insects, their movements furtive, their eyes catching what little light remains with an animal shine. Hunger has carved them down to bone and sinew, but hunger also keeps them moving. To stop is to surrender, and surrender is death. The gangs here are more than gangs. They are empires in miniature. One controls the sump lakes, rationing the toxic water like it were emissac. Another commands the fungus farms, their harvesters scarred by years of inhaling spores. A third rules the paths to the markets, their toll exacted in flesh as often as coin. They fight ceaselessly, each raid answered by two more, each betrayal punished with pyres that turn night into a false day. Children are drafted as runners, their thin legs quick enough to carry messages between fronts. Many never return, their bones left where they fell, picked clean by vermin or gathered by rival gangs as trophies. And yet, in this world of perpetual war, there are moments of strange tenderness. A woman places a shard of cracked glass before her shack, its edges bound in cloth, and calls it a mirror. She smooths her daughter's hair before the shard each morning, as though grooming for a life that will never come. An old man hums songs of the manufactoria above, his voice broken but steady, and others join in, their words fumbling but their rhythm shared. For a heartbeat, the sound becomes stronger than the guns, a defiance written in breath. These fragments never last, but they prove that humanity survives even when stripped to its marrow. The shadows harbor things worse than hunger. Sometimes, when the fires burn low, screams echo through the tunnels that belong to no human throat. People vanish in groups, their shelters found days later empty, food and water left untouched. Survivors whisper of pale figures moving in the dark, their eyes glowing faintly green, their footsteps silent as smoke. Some say they are the restless dead, others that they are Xenos long buried beneath the hive, woken by the press of billions above. No priest dares descend to confirm or deny. The gangs dismiss the tales as fear-mongering, but they station more guards by their borders all the same. The hive above ignores these disappearances, if it even knows of them. To the scribes who tally tithes, the underhive does not exist. To the Artabites, it is a void outside their jurisdiction, too costly to pacify, too deep to matter. Only when uprisings threaten to claw upward do the spires take notice, sending squads of Artabites or regiments of Ostra Militarum into the depths. The soldiers returned broken if they return at all. Most vanish into the black, their names struck from rolls, their families told they died in service. The hive buries its shame beneath the weight of new conscripts, and the underhive continues unchanged.
Still, hope crawls even here. Some whisper of stairwells that rise not upward, but outward, tunnels that lead to wastes beyond the hive's shadow. They speak of air that does not sting, of light that comes from a true sun, of silence not broken by the machine's heart. No one has proof. Those who chase the dream rarely return, but in nights when hunger gnaws too sharply, or when the gangs grow too cruel, even the hardest faces tilt upward, wondering if such a place could exist. The thought alone is dangerous. It makes one pause, makes one dream, and dreaming in the underhive can kill. The depths of the hive are not an ending, but an abyss that never ceases.
Every step downward is a step further into hunger, into ash, into silence. And yet, as long as a single ember of defiance burns in the dark, the hive does not win. The people endure, forgotten but unbroken. For in the depths, survival itself becomes rebellion, and rebellion is the only language left to those who hunger. Night in the underhive is a trick of perception, for darkness is constant, but there are hours when the fires gutter low and even the markets fall silent. Those hours are when the hive feels least human, when the silence seems to press inward, thick as stone. Families huddle closer, clutching their meager belongings, whispering prayers to saints whose names have long been forgotten. The air tastes of old smoke and fungus, and every drip of water echoes like a hammer. To survive these hours is to endure fear as palpable as hunger. Predators thrive in this silence. Some are human, moving in packs with knives and chains, searching for settlements too weak to defend themselves. They strike without warning, torching shacks and dragging the living into the dark, leaving behind only bones for vermin. Others are not human at all. Strange shapes slither between shadows, their movements too fast to follow, their eyes glimmering faint green or red like embers buried in ash. The people of the underhive do not name them, for naming gives power. They simply bar their doors, whisper louder prayers, and pray the things pass by. The gangs grow strongest at night. Torches flare as raiding parties set out, war cries echoing through abandoned transit tunnels. Gunfire cracks, ricocheting off ferrocrete until the sound rolls like thunder. Victories are short, often measured in a few stolen rations, a few new slaves, a handful of weapons. Yet each battle is fought with the fury of armies, for in the underhive, survival itself is war. When dawn comes, though dawn here means only the rekindling of fires, smoke lingers over charred barricades, and the blood has already sunk into the dust. Children pick through corpses for scraps. Life goes on. There are those who attempt to bring order. Preachers descend from the higher levels, their robes tattered from ash, their hands clutching relics meant to command awe. Some find followers, gathering small congregations in ruined chapels, where hymns echo against cracked vaults. They speak of endurance, of redemption, of the God-Emperor's gaze stretching even into the abyss. For a time their words light sparks in hollow eyes, but eventually the gangs take notice, and preachers are silenced, their relics stolen, their congregations scattered. Still, new voices always descend, as though faith itself cannot help but challenge the dark. Legends abound in miracles. A starving family finds a cache of rations in a collapsed tunnel, every package untouched, its seals pristine. A gang leader claims to have seen a golden figure walking through the smoke, his presence silencing weapons, his hand guiding them to victory. A dying child whispers a prayer and rises fever-free the next day. For every tale, there are 10 denials, but the stories persist. They give shape to endurance. They give reason to continue. Perhaps they are true, perhaps they are lies, but in the underhive, truth matters less than survival. Some dream of rising back towards the spires, of climbing stairwells long blocked, of bribing their way into manufactoria shifts, where at least the labor comes with rations. These few are often caught and dragged down, their hopes mocked, their bodies broken. Others dream of escape outward, into the wastes beyond the hive. These are the ones who vanish in droves, leaving behind only rumors. Perhaps they find freedom. Perhaps the wastes are worse than the depths. No one knows. Yet the dream persists, fragile as fungus light, unkillable as hunger.
And then there are the whispers that chill even hardened hearts, that the hive itself breeds monsters, that its forgotten levels hide engines of ancient design, pulsing with power older than the Imperium. Some claim these machines feed on lives, swallowing souls as fuel. Others say they open doors into realms beyond sight, places where time itself dissolves. No gang claims these stories, and no priest preaches them. They exist only as murmurs, traded in the shadows when fires burn low. Whether true or not, they make the blackness heavier, the silence more unbearable. The underhive does not end.
It only deepens, drawing life into itself until nothing remains but ash, hunger, and memory. Those who dwell here do not call it despair, for despair implies choice. They call it existence, and existence, no matter how raw, is enough. For every night survived is a victory. Every breath stolen from the dark is defiance. And though the hive forgets them, though the spires above pretend they never lived, the underhivers endure. They endure because they must. They endure because no one else will. And as the echoes of their survival rise upward, faint as smoke, the hive above trembles. Not from pity, but from the reminder that even forgotten lives burn. The hive speaks in smoke, but the faithful answer in fire. At shift's end, when the manufactoria exhale their last red breath for the cycle and the underhive settles to its uneasy rumble, the chapels fill like lungs. Doors fashioned from scavenged armor plates swing inward on shrines built against heat exchangers and coolant mains, and the air changes from iron to incense. Boots scuff across flagstones grooved by generations of knees. Candles gutter in the drafts, and faces lift toward icons that have outlived empires. In this light, the scars of labor soften. In this light, even the poorest look momentarily crowned. Priests of the ecclesiarchy move through the crush, robes stitched and restitched so many times their threads resemble sutures. Some wear vox collars that crackle with amplified fervor. Others carry only their voices, raw as scraped metal. They speak of endurance made holy, of duty forged into sanctity, of the God Emperor's will running through every conduit of the city like current. Their words rise and coil beneath the vaults, threading the gloom as surely as the pipes. No one believes that hunger lessens for a sermon's length. Yet those who come do not come for relief. They come to be seen by the stone, to be counted by statues that never close their eyes. A confessor with a face like a broken anvil lays a hand on the brow of a woman whose fingers still tremble with press vibration. He marks her with the sign of the imperial aquila and tells her that labor is prayer with the body. Beside him, an acolyte reads names into a cracked data slate, each syllable paired with a coin no thicker than a scab. Back in the nave, a hospitaller binds a child's coughing ribs with cloth dipped in boiled water, whispering litanies learned in a convent that now exists only in memory. Their work is small against the immensity of need. It is also everything. Faith in the hive is never quiet. It clangs like a bell and smolders like promethium. Redemptionist processions burn through the mid-levels, scarlet hoods drawn, torches thrust high, their chants striking sparks along the corridor arches. They preach purification by pain, and those who have already bled nod as if greeted by kin. On other nights, orders more gentle move silently, offering soup thin as breath and icons stamped from scrap, teaching prayers so spare they fit between coughs. The spectrum between zeal and solace fills the city the way soot fills lungs. For every throat that curses the heavens, 10 more sing until their voices split. Relics travel with these tides, wrapped in oiled cloth, bells stitched to their edges like warnings. A jawbone said to be from a martyr who died defending a ration queue. A skull caged in bronze and wired to illumine so that faith glows when offerings are sufficient. A splinter of saint's staff, or of habbeam, or of rail spine. No one agrees, and the argument is irrelevant. The relic is a center of gravity around which despair can orbit without being flung away. When the cloth is lifted, people surge, faces wet with condensation and weeping alike. And for a heartbeat, the hive's incessant tremor seems to steady.
Miracles are never announced. They are discovered afterward, like bruises.
A sump farm's yield doubles the week a preacher blesses its fungus with a handful of hash. A lift that has bucked and trembled for years carries a full cage 3 days running without a single jolt. A fever breaks between one hymn and the next. The priests record these in ledgers, green-lit cursive crawled across worn screens, careful to name them mercies rather than proof. Those who witness swear stronger words in private. Skeptics mutter that the fungus was due, the lift was repaired at last, the fever ran its course. But when the next procession passes, skeptics still reach for the torchlight with open hands. Rumors grow where candles gutter. Some whisper of an image of the god-emperor weeping resin tears in a chapel wedged between two manufactoria, the droplets hardening into amber beads that cure a cough when warmed upon the tongue. Others claim that within the labyrinth of the underhive, a statue of a nameless saint turns to face whichever child most needs bread that night. A few, their eyes hollowed by loss, swear that a golden figure walked the smoke above a riot and every weapon lowered of its own accord. The ecclesiarchy does not confirm these tales, because to confirm is to promise, and to promise is peril. Instead, they direct the momentum. They shape it into hymns. They turn it toward work that must be done. Not all whispers are gentle. There are darker liturgies for those who cannot reconcile the machine's appetite with the language of mercy. In rusted side chapels, penitents scourge their backs until their breath comes ragged, offering pain as tithe. In hidden cells, ascetics bind their eyes to learn the shape of faith by heat alone. Some carve the aquila into the doorframes of their habs so deeply the steel bends, daring the hive to forget them now. Some burn their ration chits as sacrifice, trusting that a miracle will arrive in the smoke. Often it does not. Often the next morning is only the next morning. Still they persist, because persistence is the marrow of this place. Above the nave of a crowded shrine, a mural spans the curve of a pipe-sheathed vault. Terra drawn as a sun behind the emperor's throne. The Astronomicon rendered as a river of light streaming outward into night. The painter has never seen Terra. None present have. But they know the story the way the skin knows heat and the lungs know dust. They know that the golden throne burns to make the Astronomicon shine, that ships find their paths by agony sanctified into navigation. This is not a doctrine recited from fear. It is a fact put to melody, a calculus of suffering that makes sense of the city's arithmetic. The faithful do not pretend to see the whole machine. They only swear that their small motions sync with it. On the chapel threshold, where coolant vapor laces the incense and the clang of ducts becomes rhythm for prayer, a man who has not believed since childhood stops and bows his head. He does not know if he is seen. He does not know if anyone is counting. In the corner of the nave, a catechist writes another name into a ledger and runs a thumb along the cracked spine of an icon. "We endure," he says softly, a benediction and a diagnosis both. The hive answers with a hiss of steam, like a giant shushing its own heart. Outside, the procession's fire paints the corridor walls gold. For a few paces, the light looks like morning. Faith does not belong only to the chapels. It bleeds into the corridors, the manufactoria, even the underhive, where hunger bites deeper than scripture. Processions march through the night, their flames reflecting in rusted walls, their chants rising like a tide against despair. Children cling to their mothers as scarlet-hooded redemptionists swing censers that spit sparks, their voices hoarse from hours of repetition. They preach purification by fire, calling every wound a blessing, every cough a hymn. To outsiders they are terrifying. To those within the hive, they are familiar, as constant as smoke. The zeal of these processions leave marks. After they pass, doorframes are scorched where torches brush too close, and whole hab blocks smell of ash for days. Yet people welcome them, because where they walk, order follows. Thieves scatter. Gangs lower their knives. Even the Arbites allow the fire-bearers to move unchecked, wary of tangling with zeal that can spark into riot. The flames are not sanctioned, but they are tolerated, for they hold the hive together as tightly as rivets.
In other corners, faith takes gentler forms. Sisters of the Hospitaller spread thin across the lower levels, bearing vials of water purified just enough to taste different from rust, bearing bandages stitched from old banners. They work without fanfare, their voices soft, their eyes unblinking, even when wounds are too great to mend. They know that healing one child while 10 die is a futility. They do it anyway. Their whispered litanies become lullabies in the dark, and many a dying man breathes his last to the rhythm of a prayer he never learned until that moment. The sermons of the ecclesiarchy resound above it all, but even they cannot silence rumor. Faith is more than doctrine here. It is survival, written in story. Tales of saints who walked among the sump farms, turning mold into bread, spread like sparks across the hab levels. A preacher declares that a statue of the God Emperor lowered its eyes in the manufactoria, and within a week, the shift's accidents fall by half. The overseers insist the machines were repaired, but workers whispered that the Emperor himself tightened the bolts. Rumor is faith's currency, and in the hive, it spends fast. Some stories turn darker. A confessor preaches that those who fall behind their quotas are cursed by sin, and soon workers turn on one another, fearing contamination of the soul more than punishment of the flesh. Gangs carve Aquilas into their skin, claiming it marks them as chosen, and then raid rival districts with zealotry painted in blood. Families light candles at shrines, praying not for salvation, but that their neighbors will be taken first. Faith does not always heal. Sometimes it infects, twisting desperation into violence sanctified by liturgy. The hive itself becomes a cathedral. Its endless spires are read as towers of devotion, its sumpfires as votive flames, its conduits as veins carrying the emperor's lifeblood. Workers lift their eyes to the black smoke rising into the void and call it incense. Even the endless thunder of the manufactoria becomes rhythm for chant. To live here is to breathe faith with every lungful of poison, to taste it in rations, to hear it in the iron. Some call it madness. The faithful call it endurance. At night, when the processions have burned past and the sermons have dimmed, the hive whispers with its own prayers. Men carve icons into steel beams with knives meant for labor. Women etch litanies into their skin with nails, offering blood as ink. Children sing hymns half-remembered, their voices echoing down corridors until the words sound like ghosts. Not all of it is sanctioned. Much of it is heresy. But the hive is too vast to silence, and the emperor's name is too heavy to stay still. Every whisper adds weight, and in time, weight becomes truth. Above it all, the ecclesiarchy records, tallies, directs. They cannot control the shape of faith, but they can guide its flood. When rumors grow too wild, they release their own, visions of terror, stories of custodian guards standing watch beyond mortal sight, whispers that the emperor himself stirs when his name is spoken in the depths. Whether these are truths or tools, no one dares to ask. It does not matter. The hive listens, the hive believes, and belief is the one thing that endures when flesh and stone collapse. The higher levels tell themselves that faith is discipline, a straight road paved with catechisms, guarded by priests who know every word. But in the hive's depths, faith is wild, feral, a flame that consumes whatever it touches. There are shrines that do not resemble shrines at all, corridors where rust has bled into patterns red as the Aquila's wings.
walls blackened by promethium flare taken as images of saints. Whole hab blocks gather before these accidental icons, leaving offerings of ration crumbs and fragments of bone, convinced the emperor himself drew his mark there. The ecclesiarchy may scorn such worship, but they cannot extinguish it. The hive is too vast, and desperation too fertile a soil for visions.
Others take quieter paths. In hidden cells far from torchlight, ascetics seal their eyes with wax, claiming sight blinds them to the emperor's will. They fast until they collapse, their lips split and dry, their bodies trembling in ecstasy mistaken for fever. Some die this way, their corpses discovered weeks later by scavengers who take their relic-laden bones as offerings. Some endure, thin as wire, their voices calm and steady, their words carrying more weight than any sermon. Even arbitites tread carefully when such men speak, wary of the strange reverence they command. Whispers circulate of miracles that cannot be dismissed. A man who fell into a sump fire walked out unscathed, his skin blackened but whole, his eyes glowing with light not reflected from any torch. A woman in the manufactoria worked 6 shifts without rest, her body refusing collapse, and when questioned, she said she felt the emperor's hand holding her upright. A child died of plague, and yet 3 days later she was seen walking, her hair white, her eyes distant, her voice speaking only litanies. Whether these were divine or some mutation born of poison and radiation, no one dares declare. What matters is the faith they spark, and faith, once sparked, spreads faster than fire. The gangs harness faith as weapon and shield. Leaders declare themselves chosen, saints in the making, their scars red as holy brands. They march their followers into battle beneath banners daubed with crude aquilas, their chants echoing louder than gunfire. To fight them is to fight not only hunger and desperation, but conviction sharpened to a blade's edge. Rival gangs adopt their own saints, their own relics, until every skirmish becomes a holy war, every corpse a martyr. Blood feeds the sump soil, and from that soil, faith grows stronger. The ecclesiarchy walks a knife's edge in this furnace of devotion. Too much tolerance and zeal consumes itself into anarchy. Too much suppression and uprisings erupt that burn whole sectors. So the priests weave carefully, letting some fires rage, dousing others with doctrine and ritual. They recite stories of Terra, of the master of mankind seated upon the golden throne, his gaze piercing the void, his agony guiding ships across the stars. They teach that every drop of blood spilled, every breath inhaled through soot, adds weight to his endurance. They never say the emperor suffers, they say he endures, and so must they. Endurance is faith made flesh. And yet, in quiet moments, even priests admit unease. They hear visions not in line with canon, dreams of the emperor walking among the spires, dreams of voices whispering in the smoke, dreams of fire turning to green light in the depths. They record them carefully, then bury them in ledgers locked behind shrines. For every faith is a shield, but also a door, and not all doors should be opened. The hive breathes faith because it has no other choice. Without it, the weight of hunger, labor, and despair would crush the people into silence. Faith keeps them speaking, keeps them singing, keeps them alive even when their bodies beg for rest. It is not gentle, not pure, not even always holy, but it is endurance given voice, and in that voice, the hive hears itself.
The ecclesiarchy does what it can to harness these movements. Priests arrive with incense and relics, blessing shrines born of accident, folding them into sanctioned liturgy. But the hive does not wait for sanction. It believes first, and doctrine follows. A mural painted by a starving worker becomes a relic when the faithful claim they see it glow. A broken cogitator spitting static becomes an oracle when the static begins to repeat half words that sound like prophecy. A dead man's hand, still clenched around a ration shit, is declared a symbol of sacrifice when his family swears they found bread where none should be. In the Hive, faith does not require permission. It requires only hunger, strong enough to need meaning. There are dangers to such belief. Heresy thrives in shadows, wearing the mask of devotion. Cults rise from the sump, whispering that the emperor demands not endurance but liberation from the Hive itself. They carve their symbols into steel, symbols not recognized by any canon, symbols that burn into the mind when stared at too long. They gathered the desperate, promising miracles not of survival, but of transformation. And when the Arbites discover them, they fall with merciless precision, the cultists' bodies left as warnings. Yet, for every cult burned out, another smolders into being, fed by the same hunger that feeds faith. Still, for most, faith is less rebellion than lifeline. In the manufactoria, workers sing as they labor, each hammer strike falling in rhythm with a psalm. In the underhive, mothers whisper prayers into the ears of infants too malnourished to cry. In the spires, nobles commission mosaics of saints across their ceilings, claiming their privilege as divine reward. Every level, every corridor, every breath carries devotion shaped by circumstance. It binds the Hive tighter than steel. Perhaps this is why whispers grow that the emperor hears every prayer, no matter how faint. Some swear they feel warmth on their skin when they speak his name even in the coldest vents. Others claim that in their dreams they see golden light spilling down stairwells, washing away smoke. None can prove it. Proof is irrelevant. Belief is enough. Belief turns despair into ritual, suffering into offering, hunger into fast. Belief makes the impossible survivable. And so the Hive endures, not by strength alone, but by faith in endurance itself. Every whisper in the dark, every chant in the smoke, every story of miracle or martyr builds a scaffolding that holds humanity upright. The faithful do not ask for paradise. They ask only to survive another day, another shift, another night. And when they do, they call it victory, and they call it holy. The fires of the processions fade, the hymns fall quiet, and the Hive exhales its smoke into the void. Somewhere in that smoke, prayers still rise. Somewhere in that silence, faith waits to be spoken again. Beyond the chapels and the processions, beyond the sanctioned and the heretical, lies one final truth, whispered too softly to be doctrine, that perhaps the Hive itself is the Emperor's furnace, burning lives into light for the Imperium. At a distance, a Hive is a star that never cools, its spires shedding ash like light, its manufactoria flaring and dimming in cycles that pass for dawn and dusk. Up close, the illusion peels back to heat and hunger. But if one stands between distance and closeness, where the docking rings throb and the tithe barges nose through smog like blind fish, the shape of purpose emerges. Everything moves toward the same mouth, grain pressed into bricks of grit, steel smelted into armor, then hammered thinner, until it is a skin for a gun or a mask for a man. Counted bodies, measured, marked. The Hive learns the names of its children only long enough to subtract them. It is said, quietly, as a prayer and never as assertion, that such subtraction is holy, because somewhere far away, Terra burns for the sake of light. The Astronomicon threads the void, and the Golden Throne feeds it with a power none can name without trembling. In the chapels, this truth is painted a certainty.
In corridors, it is traded as rumor. In bedroll whispers, it is only a hope that suffering is not wasted.
The levy notice arrives like weather. Vox horns crackle, servo skulls unfurl parchment tongues, and a fog of auspices and seals thins into meaning. Regiments will be raised, quotas revised, transports inbound at third bell. The words ripple outward, striking the spires first, then the manufactoria, then the mid-level habs, and at last the depths where language breaks into gesture. Lives pivot on a hinge none of them can see. Factors smooth lacquered coats and adjust tallies. 4 women carve new shifts out of hours that do not exist. Mothers press palms to children's scalps and tell them the emperor measures courage in breaths, not years. In the underhive, gangs pretend indifference and quietly count who can be spared. Everyone understands the arithmetic even if they deny it. The hive pays its tithe in goods and in blood, and when demand rises, both must flow. At the rings, the world becomes machinery of departure. Munitorum clerks in dustless coats pace beneath banners stiff with age, cogitators chattering like teeth as they ingest names. Astra Militarum mustering yards bloom with tents and painted lines, the order superimposed on rust like a hymn over static. Veterans, their tags tattooed where metal could not erase them, teach children how to wear flak that does not fit and boots that will never soften. A chaplain walks the ranks, the ocula bright against gray armor speaking of service as ascension, of the emperor's gaze as a promise that no man dies unseen. Some listen, some stare through him toward the ships, their eyes already in the black, already shrinking the hive to a smear of smoke on a planetary curve they will never witness. The manufactoria answer the levy with violence disguised as labor. Presses take on a new hunger, stamping plates for chimeras and Lehman Russ halls, reshaping sheets of ore into teeth for a war they will never bite. Las packs are tested in batches that blister the hands of those who test them. Cartridge stamps run hot until numbers slur, then hotter still. A tech priest affixes purity seals along a conveyor and intones a canticle of accuracy while the forewoman below calculates the failure rate her tallies must survive. Somewhere, a valve fails and a dozen are scalded to bone. The tally board blinks, adjusts, moves on. The Scutari pace their gantries, optics whirring, guardians not of people but of function. Above them, a fresco of the emperor triumphant cracks along a line no one has time to repair. In the spires, nobles host farewell banquets that taste of theater and metal. Toasts are raised to regiments not yet formed. Promises are made in the impermeable language of those who believe promises bind the world. Outside those halls, queues coil for blocks, as families present ration chits in exchange for bundles stamped with the Munitorum's sigil, a rolled blanket, a dented canteen, a field manual whose pages crack like old paint. A girl runs her fingers across the embossed ocula and tells her brother she can feel heat in the metal. He tells her that is only the press's memory. She shakes her head. "No," she says, and tucks the emblem into her shirt as if it were a coal she must keep alive. Rumors condense into doctrine wherever the levy passes. One says that a Custodian guard once set foot on the ring road and the metal remembered, refusing to rust there ever again. Another whispers that a single tear from a statue in a dockside shrine fell on a transport's prow, and its hull sang like choir glass through the void. Priests neither confirm nor deny. They only bless and bless again, until even the doubtful glow with oils slick as faith. The underhive hears only fragments. The word terra warped into tower, astronomicon into astral omen, but the fragments are enough. Meaning is not a complete machine here.
It is a skeleton the mind clothes in its own rags. Night before departure, the hive sounds different. The presses pause just long enough for the city to hear its own lungs. In Hab corridors, icons burn low, and voices braid into a rope of prayer too quiet for registers, too strong to snap. Lovers speak vows that are not promises, but recognitions. I will remember your cough in the dark. I will hold your name when the machine tries to grind it smooth. A mother removes a saint's nail from a wall and presses it into her son's palm. He is old enough to understand that it is only iron that has touched too much blood. He is young enough to believe that iron remembers. Both truths fit in his hand.
When the dawn siren fakes morning, the levee moves. Boots drum bridges that shiver with their weight. Cargo cradles swing, the chains muttering a language that has no words for mercy. A sergeant touches the flaking gold leaf on a viewport frame and thinks, absurdly, that somewhere a window like this looks down on Terra. He has never seen stars from any place but the guts of a transport, never seen light unfiltered by smoke. As the ramp yawns and the air turns metallic, he hears the chaplain's voice as if through water. Every life is an offering, every offering a spark, every spark another line drawn across the void. He does not know if the Emperor hears him. He only knows the Hive does, because the Hive always answers with heat. And when the engines catch, the city brightens, not with hope, but with the reflected fire of departure. For a moment, the smoke above the rings looks almost like a river. Some say that is the Astronomican made visible, a mercy granted to eyes too tired to lift. Others say it is only exhaust stretched thin. The rumor will be different by evening. The levee will be gone by then. The presses will be louder. The hive will continue to burn. The levee departs, but its absence does not lighten the hive. If anything, the city grows heavier, as though the void their lives left behind must be filled with labor. The manufactoria thunder harder, the chimneys belch thicker smoke, and ration lines stretch longer. It is as if the hive itself leans forward, feeding on the departure like fuel. Families watch the sky for hours, long after the transports vanish into ash, as if hoping their prayers can keep the ships from dissolving into silence. Eventually, the sky empties. The hive remains. Rumors begin at once, whispered in Hab corridors, carried into markets, rising with smoke in chapels. Some say the transports never reach orbit, that they are swallowed whole by the void, their passengers already ash. Others insist they pierce the stars, their holds blessed by the Astronomican's light, their crews greeted on Terra itself before marching to war. The truth is unknowable to those left behind, and so faith becomes their only compass. Every voice stitches its rumor into a tapestry, and that tapestry holds the hive upright. The levee echoes even in the underhive. There, gangs tell stories of warriors returning one day, clad in armor painted with sump ash, leading revolts that will topple the spires. No one believes entirely, but the dream bleeds into graffiti scrawled across ferrocrete walls, crude images of soldiers with glowing eyes. Others twist the story darker, whispering that no one ever leaves the hive at all, that the transports circle endlessly, feeding their passengers back into manufactoria as servitors, their faces hidden behind steel. It is blasphemy to say aloud, but fear makes it plausible. Fear, in the hive, is always plausible. Meanwhile, the presses roar like gods demanding sacrifice. Weapons and tanks flow outward in endless tides, stamped with purity seals that curl in the heat before reaching the docks. Workers collapse by the dozens, their bodies carried off by servitors whose vox grills hiss only static hymns. Catechists preach that each death is sanctified, each body a candle burning for the emperor's sight. No ledger records these offerings, yet the hive remembers in its own way, through scars on walls, through maims scratched into soot, through stories murmured over fungus bread. The emperor's furnace consumes without pause, but the people invent their own methods of memory. In the spires, the levee becomes theater. Nobles compose poems for regiments they have never met, their words recited in banquet halls where wine is poured into goblets hammered from promethium casing. They call the levy proof of their devotion, as if sacrifice were theirs alone to claim. Meanwhile, on the manufactoria floors, workers know devotion as cracked hands and lungs shredded by smoke. The distance between spire and sump stretches wider with every tithe. Yet both call it faith, both call it service. The hive, indifferent, welds them together into the same offering.
And always whispers climb, that the emperor burns every prayer as fuel for the golden throne, that every ration denied, every cough endured, every death unmarked is a spark added to the Astronomicon, that Terra itself is less a world than a pyre, its surface paved with bones, its sky bleeding light across the void. Priests insist these are metaphors, allegories meant to steady the faithful. But for those who choke in the hive's smoke, the idea of their pain transmuted into light feels more than metaphor. It feels necessary. Without it, the suffering is only silence. Children learn to repeat this truth before they learn to write. They carve Aquilus into Hab walls, their small hands smudged with soot, their voices rising in shrill chants. We burn, we light, we endure. For them, the levy is not an ending but a beginning, proof that one day their names too will be spoken in chapels, their ashes woven into the emperor's fire. Parents weep quietly at the sound, not out of sorrow, but because the words have become inheritance. Faith passes down like rations, sometimes too thin to nourish, yet always enough to survive. The hive does not ask if the emperor hears, it only demands that its people believe he does. Belief is what keeps the presses beating, what keeps the levee filled, what keeps the darkness from swallowing the city whole. And so the hive burns, its people burning with it, convinced that their fire climbs higher than smoke, higher than sky, higher even than stars. When the levee's echo fades, the hive turns inward to reckon with its own arithmetic. Hab ledgers thicken with names crossed out, work rosters reprinted until the ink smears, and 4 women walk the catwalks, counting bodies by silhouettes rather than faces. In chapels, the confessors' voices grow rough from promising that absence is a kind of presence, that a man who steps aboard a troop transport still stands beside his family in the sight of the god emperor. The proof of this is never given. Proof is not the currency here. Continuance is. Tithes shift like fault lines. Whole lines in the manufactoria are retooled to feed regiments already gone, replacement plates for tanks yet to be lost, las gun barrels by the thousand against a loss rate no one dares voice. Tech priests daub sacred oils onto conveyors that have not cooled in a generation, their binaric rustling like insects beneath the ceiling fans. The Scutari add a new pace to their patrols, and it seems, to those who watch, that even their augmetic eyes carry the exhaustion of an entire city. But steel does not tire. Steel only fails. And failure here is tutored back into tempo with a prayer and a wrench. The underhive, too, learns new rhythms. With so many taken by levy or swallowed by labor, gangs fracture and coalesce like smoke. Territories dissolve, then harden beneath fresh sigils smeared in sump ash. Markets thin to a whisper and then flare back, burning bright for a day when a luck walker drags up a sealed crate from a collapsed transit. Ration bricks decades old, their seals crazed, their taste of dust and salt. For one night the braziers blaze higher, laughter rises sharp as knife edges, and rumors about the ships turn triumphant. The next morning, the crate is empty, and rumor returns to fear. In the spires, the theater grows baroque. A noble house unveils a mosaic of Terra, hammered from scrap gold. The Astronomicon is depicted as a river of hammered light, its current carrying the small figures of conscripts out across a void studded with gemstone stars. A priest blesses the mosaic with oils thin as tears, and the crowd murmurs in awe. Down in a mid-level corridor that sweats, children chalk the same river in white dust across a rusted bulkhead, and then blow on it until the line runs ragged. Both images glow for an instant, the first with lumen reflection, the second with breath held too long. Both are worship.
Not all reckonings are made with art. The Arbites receive a dictate, and patrols shift to guard grain silos and promethium stores with a vigilance sharpened by rumor of shortages. Shotguns gleam, visors remain blank. When hunger pushes a crowd too hard and a gate is tested, the retort is immediate and final. The catechists arrive 10 minutes later with icons and cloths and words that frame the dead as offerings. Even grief is tithed, a portion to memory, a portion to function, a portion to faith. Whispers, always the hive's second breath, grow stranger the longer the levy is gone. A factor swears that a void ship's shadow passed across the roof of the world at noon, and every lumen strip brightened by a fraction. A sump preacher claims a gilt-eyed revenant in flak fatigues walked out of the vents, traced an aquila in frost on a habdor, and vanished before anyone could speak. The ecclesiarchy records both accounts in a ledger, where certainties and lies share a column, then closes the book with a sigh and a blessing. Between rumor and record there is no clear seam. The hive wears both like plates riveted from different wars. No one speaks aloud of the golden throne as a furnace, not in doctrinal terms. But the metaphor prowls the corridors regardless, a beast too large to drag from the mind. Mothers hold sleeping children and bargain in whispers with a light they have never seen. Take my hours, take the skim from my hands, take the breath I would have used to rest, only carry his name a little farther. 4 women fold scrap parchment into tiny wings and set them beneath statues, so the weight of prayer has something to press against. Even a Scutarius pauses once, optics humming, as a hymn from a distant nave threads the gantry, and for a heartbeat, the machine in his chest meets a rhythm not listed in any rite. The machinists speak of headroom and tolerances. The faithful answer with a vocabulary of mercy. The gangs count cartridges and rations. The nobles count donations. The Arbites count heartbeats before violence. All these arithmetics add to the same sum. The city continues. And continuation, in a place so saturated with ending, feels like rebellion sanctified into routine. On a night when the chemrain falls in cords as straight as wire, a procession climbs from the vents, with torches held low to keep their flames from the damp. The fire paints the undersides of pipes gold. Sparks leap and die on wet grating. A confessor raises his voice and names endurance, the only miracle that does not haggle with proof. Workers step out of habs and stand without speaking. Children hush. Even the servitors' vox grills slow their static to a tone that could be taken for listen. The torches pass. The smoke curls upward. Somewhere above, a docking bell tolls once, then again, as if counting the city's pulse. When the bell's echo drains away, the hive seems to inhale. In that momentary silence, a thought as fragile as a filament threads the darkness. That to burn here and now might, by chain of mysteries no one can untangle, cast a line of light across distances the mind cannot hold. No priest nails it down as law. No tech priest encodes it in a rite. Yet the idea persists because the night requires it to. People step back into their habs and relight their small lamps, as if participating in a ritual older than doctrine and more immediate than prayer. Outside, the rain slackens.
The pipes begin their familiar ticking as they cool. In the manufactoria, a first press stirs before the siren, eager as a beast remembering hunger. The city prepares to add another day to the ledger. Somewhere beyond sight, transports traverse a darkness charted by pain made navigable. The hive will never see them. It will only feed them. Tomorrow, the levy's rumors will change shape again. The work will not. The fire will not. The furnace is patient.
The hive does not sleep, yet even its endless rhythm falters at times, slowing to something that feels like a heartbeat. In those pauses, one sees the truth too stark to ignore, that the city is not a home, not a shelter, not even a prison. It is a furnace. It takes raw ore, raw grain, raw flesh, and tempers them in heat until they are no longer what they were. Steel emerges as blade, grain as ration, flesh as regiment. Each transmutation is sacrifice disguised as industry. Each sacrifice becomes another flame in a fire that reaches far beyond this world. For those inside the furnace, the metaphor hardens into marrow. They learn to think of themselves as fuel, their lives measured in sparks, their deaths in smoke. A worker sings to the rhythm of the presses, and in his song he imagines his voice traveling upward, fusing with the Astronomicon's light. A soldier boards a transport with flak armor too large for his shoulders, telling himself that even if he dies unnamed, the fire of his passing will illuminate the emperor's gaze for a moment longer. A mother buries her child in the ash below a broken lumen strip and tells herself the emperor needed another star for his sky. In such stories, grief becomes bearable, because grief is no longer an ending, but a contribution. The priests encourage this language, for without it, the hive would fracture under its own weight. They preach that the emperor himself once walked among furnaces, that his flesh burned with the same fire, that his throne is both agony and engine, pain refined into light. They call every cough a hymn, every scar a scripture, every empty stomach a fast sanctified by purpose. And when someone falters, when despair overwhelms, they tell them the truth no one dares to contest. Without your spark, the fire dims. Without the fire, the Imperium falls. Without the Imperium, there is only night. Few can imagine what night means. Fewer still wish to try. Rumor spreads its own theology. Some whisper that the hive itself is alive, a titanic reliquary built to consume lives as incense. Its towers are ribs, its ducts veins, its smokestacks lungs that exhale flame into the void. To live here is to live within a body greater than human, a body whose only function is to burn itself on behalf of Terra. Others claim the emperor breathes through the hive, that every hiss of steam is his exhale, every grinding gear his heartbeat. Such tales are not canon, but they cling to the walls, scratched in soot, passed through children's games, muttered as charms before sleep. Whether they are true is irrelevant. They are necessary, and necessity is a kind of holiness.
The Arbites dismiss such whispers as folly. The Mechanicus records them as corrupted data, yet even they cannot escape the furnace's pull. An Arbite's patrol pauses at a shrine built from slag and broken bayonets. One trooper touches the rust and leaves behind a flake of skin as if an offering. A tech priest hears a hymn vibrating through ductwork and marks the resonance in a data slate, noting without irony that the pitch matches a centacle from Mars. The furnace consumes not only the weak but the strong, not only the faithful but the skeptical. In time, everyone becomes fuel. And still the hive endures. Day after day, year after year,
It produces more than it consumes, giving more to the Imperium than it keeps for itself. Its survival is not a miracle, it is design. A design as cruel as it is effective. A design written into ferrocrete and smoke. A design that convinces its people their suffering is not wasted, that their ashes climb higher than their bodies ever could. They are told they are sparks in a fire older than stars, and most believe it. Those who do not still live as if it were true, because to deny it would be to collapse, and collapse is the only heresy the Hive will not permit. At night, when the smoke thins and the stars show through, a worker may pause on a catwalk and lift his eyes. He will see no Astronomicon, no golden throne, no Terra. He will see only pinpricks of cold fire in an endless black. Yet in his chest he feels the furnace's heat, and he tells himself that his life, however small, however brief, fuels something larger. Whether that something is truth or only hope does not matter. What matters is that the furnace burns, and through it, the Imperium endures.